Live from our hurricane headquarters with real-time analysis from some of the nation's top meteorologists. This is Tracking the Tropics, powered by Bose Electric.
Happy Tuesday. Welcome to our normally scheduled edition of Tracking the Tropics. Of course, we're looking at the remnants of Beryl right there dissipating, and we are live in the WFLA Now studio. I'm joined by meteorologist Amanda Holly. I'm meteorologist Rebecca Berry. And so I just wanted to bring us up for a second and say welcome back to Amanda. She just got back from a fabulous vacation. Does she look more tan? She is.
I did. It was wonderful, but I've been keeping an eye on the tropics. Of course, Beryl was moving through the Caribbean while I was on vacation and certainly kept a close eye on it. Didn't impact us here in Tampa, but it has been a long-lived storm. This is day 12 of Beryl, but it is officially post-tropical at this point, Rebecca.
Yes, and I want to bring in our featured meteorologist of the week, and very topical because it's right. Basically, he just finished a 12-hour day of covering tornadoes from his local area. This is Joel Young, KARK Meteorologist. Welcome, Joel.
Good morning there, Rebecca and Amanda. Thank you all so much for having me. You know, I was talking earlier before we went on the air. We scheduled this interview, a month ago?
Yeah.
Well before Beryl was ever a thing. So, what are the odds that, here we are after, like you said, a 12-hour shift. It was a very busy day yesterday. You mentioned it was we're now down to a post-tropical cyclone. That transition happened right over Arkansas. It was a tropical depression as it was moving into the southwest corner of the state, and now it is a post-tropical storm over the northeast corner of the state. It just went from southwest to northeast, and before that center of circulation ever got into Arkansas, we already had tornado warnings ongoing, tornado producing warnings. It wasn't just your run-of-the-mill tornado warnings, maybe not. We had several confirmed, and it was tough. Finding tornadoes in a tropical system is like finding a needle in the haystack.
Yeah.
So that was challenge last night.
It certainly was. Luckily you guys are getting in on some of that drier air on the backside of it now. You're getting back to a little bit more normal of a day for you as Beryl continues to dissipate, Rebecca. But luckily, it's really the only thing we're tracking out there right now. We have the tropics quieting down, which is exciting. We're going to be talking about that on this episode of Tracking the Tropics, as well as Colorado State just issued their updated forecast. So every season they issue a preseason forecast and then they eventually update it as the season goes on. So this was a regularly scheduled update. It was just kind of timed with Beryl as it was dissipating. But this is the circulation. What's left of the circulation is just no longer tropical, right? So there's still a lot of moisture associated with it, but it's lost that tropical characteristics. That's why it is now considered post-tropical. So the National Hurricane Center not really doing anything with that anymore. It's left to the World Prediction Center there. But this is kind of what's happening over the state of Florida right now. Lots of moisture associated with this, but it is not becoming tropical, and I'm very happy to report that the tropics are quieting down. No new development is expected over the next 7 days, and that's in large part to a lot of Saharan dust. You can see really how quiet the Atlantic basin is, with the exception of a couple of these tropical waves coming off the coast, but they're not very robust, and we do not expect them to develop. So that is some great news on this edition of Tracking the Tropics. I know it's been a busy few weeks with Tracking the Tropics as we've continued to track Beryl. But like I just said, Beryl is now post-tropical, so we're not going to get this update anymore from the National Hurricane Center. This was the last one. Those winds are around 30 miles per hour. It's moving quickly off to the northeast at 25 miles per hour, which is very typical of a dissipating system to start to move away very quickly. But I do want to bring Joel back in to kind of talk a little bit more about what you guys experienced as Beryl kind of passed through. So this is Little Rock. Joel is in Arkansas here. This is the state of Arkansas. Now you're starting to see some of that drier air wrapping around the side of it. But Joel, talk to me a little bit about what you guys experienced. Obviously you had a lot of tornado warnings, but what kind of wind speeds and things like that did you see as Beryl moved through?
Our strongest winds we've seen with this have happened since we've started to dry out. We've gotten that drier air, some of that you go into that post-tropical transition, you start to entrain some cooler, drier air. So we've actually had some stronger wind gusts, just upwards of 25 miles per hour. So if anything, and you mentioned earlier, we're kind of going back to somewhat of a normal. Today, we've got a little bit of a west-southwest breeze. It's a little bit drier air, so the humidity is a little bit lower. Once we finally clear things out, this will be, start to go back to normal, but it's actually way cooler than average. But of course, last night we had tornado producing storms. We had storms, of course, that lingered even after the storms were no longer much of a tornado risk. We had a flash flood threat. We've gotten some spots that have gotten over 7 inches of rainfall, some areas of flooding here across the state. But to be quite honest, most of it has been in rural areas and not a lot of damage, at least at this point. Of course, we're still going through a lot of that, haven't assessed it all. But overall, I think, given the situation, the track, it could have been a lot worse.
Absolutely. And now we're seeing all of this moisture continuing to move off to the northeast. So this is kind of the last cone that we'll get right of Beryl. So that's kind of where the center, if you will, of circulation will head over the next couple of days. But really, we're just talking about some rain moving through the Midwest and through the Northeast. But looking back, we did see a significant amount of rain where it made landfall in Texas as well. This is a look at some of those rainfall totals. We had 5 inches of rain down along the coast in southern Texas, a little closer to Galveston, around 7 inches of rain, but upwards of over a foot of rainfall near Pasadena, Texas, and around a foot there, around 11 inches in Houston, which is a lot of rain, a lot of folks without power there. Unfortunately, hopefully they can get that restored very quickly. But in terms of some of those maximum wind speeds, we saw it as a Category 1 make landfall, but some of those maximum wind speeds, Freeport, 97 mile per hour gusts there, Matagorda, 89 mile per hour gust, Galveston 82, even in Houston saw an 85 mile per hour wind gust as Beryl moved through and made landfall in Texas. Obviously the storm a lot weaker at this point. We just talked about that, but some of that remnant rainfall will continue to move into the Midwest as we go through the overnight hours. So areas like Chicago and up through Michigan going to see some pretty heavy rainfall and some gustier winds, but not up to hurricane strength winds. And then as we head into tomorrow, you can see it really kind of falls apart. And actually we see this squall line develop moving through the Northeast because it's no longer tropical, right? So we get kind of a cold front looking rain from this system as it moves off. And then it'll kind of dissipate heading into tomorrow evening. So that's some good news. We're not going to be talking about Beryl for much longer, but it did form almost 2 weeks ago. It formed on June 28th as a depression. It approached the Windward Islands, strengthening quickly as it did. Remember, Beryl was a pretty strong storm, but unfortunately it did pass over those the southern islands of the Lesser Antilles as a Category 4. It became that Category 5 storm late on July 1st. Moving through the Caribbean, passed through Jamaica. The southern end of that island certainly got in on some of that stronger eye wall as a Category 4. Re-strengthened back into a Category 3 as it moved into the Yucatan Peninsula. Was weak for a couple of days. It battled some dry air as it moved into the Gulf of Mexico, which was some good news because it delayed that strengthening, but it was strengthening upon landfall, which is why we saw some of those stronger gusts along the coastline there. But certainly Beryl is going to, even though it was an early on storm here, and we're not going to be talking about it for much longer, it is certainly going to make its impact on the 2024 season because it broke a lot of records. It was strongest, it is the strongest storm on record in June and July with maximum winds of 165 miles per hour. And with that, it was a Category 5, but it was the earliest Category 5 storm ever recorded by 15 days. It also rapidly intensified 95 miles per hour in just 48 hours. We saw that storm grow in size, but also mainly in intensity because it did remain a rather strong storm. So Beryl, yes, it is now in the books. Actually, Chris is now in the books too. It was a short-lived tropical storm in the Gulf of Mexico. We're now 3 names down in the 2024 season, but wanted to talk a little bit about the Colorado State updated forecast here. Remember, an average season contains 14 named storms, which does include the 3 named storms that we've already had. NOAA is also forecasting an above average season. Both NOAA and CSU previously forecasted an above average season, but Colorado State updated their forecast at 11 a.m. today. And they increased their number of named storms by 2. They increased their hurricanes by 1. They also increased their major hurricanes by 1. So they're now calling for 6 major hurricanes of the season, which again does include Beryl because that was a major hurricane. But we are nonetheless looking at a hyperactive season because of the ingredients at play. Mind you, we've had 3 storms already in just 6 weeks of the season. We have a long rest of the ways to go. August, September, and October are peak season. We're only here on the timeline. We have a long ways to go, so we will see a lot of activity, I do believe, heading into the next couple of months. Although right now, luckily, things are quieting down, and that is in large part thanks to Saharan dust. So certainly, Beryl, we'll remember Beryl for a while because of how many records it broke. But luckily, all of us meteorologists tracking Beryl will get a little bit of a break over the next couple of weeks.
Yes, and I wanted to remind the viewers, if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, in order for us to be able to see that question and feature it, you have to use one of the featured hashtags. They're below our names on the banner, so you can use hashtag Hey Rebecca, hashtag Hey Amanda, or hashtag Hey Joel, and that way we'll be able to bring in your comments. And we're about to lose Joel to his noon show, so I wanted to give him the floor for a minute for his thoughts on the season and what's going on in the tropics.
It definitely has that feeling. Here we are, as you were just mentioning, 3 names in, it's the fact that we even saw a rapid intensification occur on the last day of the month of June. It just gives you kind of this feeling that, it concerns you, of course. And of course, now seeing the new forecast, it's concerning. And so I'm afraid that this is just the beginning. So I don't like to sound like that. I don't like to sound like, some sort of doomsayer, but, we've seen 2005, we've seen 2020, and we'll just see what 2024 brings, and I hope it's better than it looks right now.
Yeah, we're all hopeful that, even though we could see, that number of named storms, which obviously would be a lot, hopefully most of them will stay out in the Atlantic. But some of those factors that we've talked about over the past couple of weeks, and I'm sure you've been keeping an eye on, Joel, the warm record, the record warm water temperatures, La Nina developing, El Nino is officially dissipated at this point. So we're still seeing La Nina coming into play over the next couple of months. It's all going to factor into, a hyperactive season, which is storm after storm. So hopefully most of them will stay out in the Atlantic, but, we have to prepare for the one or possibly more.
I'm wondering if this season is going to be defined by rapid intensification because of the fact that we have that record warmth. We saw Beryl rapidly intensify on the last day of June, like Joel mentioned, and then Beryl was intensifying again upon landfall. If it had had another 12 hours out over those warm Gulf waters, who knows how strong it could have gotten.
Yeah, because those Gulf waters are incredibly warm, Joel.
It was. I was just going to say, at the very last minute, it was an intensifying storm, and I feel like the only thing that really stopped it was landfall. So, I think you're right, Rebecca. I feel like this is a season that we've seen time and time again, rapid intensification happen. I feel like we've seen this movie time and time again. And, unfortunately, sometimes those storms have that look. So I'm afraid we might see more of that this year.
Absolutely. And we have our first questions coming in. So just a reminder, you can use the hashtags, Hey Amanda, Hey Joel, or Hey Rebecca, and we can feature your comments just like this. And this one is hashtag Hey Amanda. What happened to the storm that was immediately behind Beryl? Did it dissipate in the Caribbean?
That is a great question because for a while, as we were tracking Beryl intensifying, moving into and through the Caribbean, there was a tropical wave right behind Beryl that had a high chance of developing. A lot of those forecast models that we rely upon for those longer range forecasts continued to develop it, not necessarily into as strong of a storm, but they eventually did back off, and that tropical wave never developed. So that was some great news. Nothing developed in the wake of Beryl, so that has officially dissipated. And at the moment, we are not tracking any new development over the next 7 days.
Say that without smiling.
Yes.
It does feel like we've gotten back to what our more normal July pattern is, after Beryl,
yes,
with it being very quiet and very dusty out there, which we got beautiful sunsets last night.
We did. They were beautiful yesterday. They were beautiful the day before as well. We got some of those pinks in there. Some of that dust may even reach out to you, Joel, because it's coming in thick waves at this point, which is typically what we would see this time of year.
Yeah, I was just thinking that's probably something we'll be talking about in the next few days, something extra. While things are sunny and getting hot, we're back to regularly programmed, regularly scheduled summer, I guess, so that'll be something to talk about.
Certainly getting hot and humid once again, but not necessarily talking about tropical humidity this time of the year, which is good.
All I could think of when I saw the updated forecast and your graphic of when we're most busy is how many of my little plans that's going to cancel.
Yes, be very aware of what your calendar looks like in August, September, and October, because It's tough to say when exactly all of those storms may develop, but it does look like, it'll be busy. We'll be tracking, multiple storms at once. But again, that doesn't mean all of them will come here. It's very difficult to pinpoint where those storms may go. Now, I will say Colorado State does issue somewhat of a higher than normal chance, that's what they're saying in their discussion, a higher than normal chance of seeing a major hurricane make landfall in the United States. But to predict that is very difficult this far out. It's a little easier to look at some of the, the forcing and the, the bigger weather patterns to see how many storms will form in a, this 6-month hurricane period. But to pinpoint where they'll actually make landfall, it's very difficult.
All right. Hey, sorry to interrupt, Amanda.
Yeah.
Rebecca, this is great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to have to get off here and do the noon show, but we'll do it again sometime, and hopefully we'll be talking about more calm tropics, right?
Yes. Glad things are calming down for you there in Arkansas, Joel. Glad you, survived Beryl as it moved through.
Get some sleep.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us. Right. Love having the featured meteorologist. That's what's so cool about this show is we have the power of all the meteorologists across the country and the next star nation that we can call on. Because honestly, I knew it was a very active day yesterday in terms of tornado warnings, but I had no idea that it was 12 solid hours of tornado warnings.
Yeah, and Arkansas didn't even see the most number of tornado warnings. We were talking before we got on Tracking the Tropics, and we went live with him that he was saying parts of Louisiana, Shreveport had a lot more than they did. So they're not necessarily used to as frequent of hurricane coverage as, say, we are here in the state of Florida, but certainly they see the effects of those dissipating tropical systems with the tornado warnings, which are cumbersome, and hopefully they didn't cause too much damage there in Arkansas.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see when the reports start to come out, because a lot of times those tropical tornadoes can do so much damage.
Yes.
And so much further inland, especially. People just don't expect that.
Yes, and because, they're in the middle of a tropical system that's dumping a lot of rainfall, it's very difficult to actually see them and predict them because they form so quickly, so they can do a lot more damage, unfortunately. But luckily, Beryl, again, is dissipating, and we're not going to be talking about Beryl for much longer. The focus now will be, on the rest of the season and how long it will be before we start to see that activity start to pop up again. It does look like at least the next 10 days, 2 weeks, things are going to be quiet. And like I said, that was because of a lot of Saharan dust. This is kind of a look, there we go, it loaded, at what's out there right now. And those are some thick plumes moving into the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, but this is going out forward in time now. And look at another plume, yet another plume, and we love to see the dust, because remember, that's dry air. So that really, it hinders that tropical development. Doesn't necessarily prevent it, but it's helpful when it's there to keep the storms a little bit weaker. But now that we are seeing La Nina forming, so El Nino is officially gone. We see La Nina forming with some of those cooler waters in the Pacific Ocean and the record warm water temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico, in the Atlantic, and the Caribbean. That is a couple of the factors that Colorado State took into account when they updated their forecast. So we are still looking at an above average season. A lot of folks might ask, and again, we're still looking and watching for those questions in the comment section about, I was curious if, as Beryl moved through the Caribbean, how much energy it actually used, because it did strengthen so quickly. So, it takes a lot of energy to strengthen into a storm like that, but there's still plenty of available energy there in the Caribbean. But you can see the path that Beryl took, used up some of it, but that energy is so deep. The warm waters are so deep in the Caribbean. That's why there's still plenty of available energy there.
And Beryl is moving so fast.
It was.
It would be a completely different story if it were going 4, 5, 6 miles per hour instead of 16.
Yeah, it didn't have enough time to kind of churn up those waters and use some of that and cool down some of those water temperatures there, because it was just moving through very quickly.
Yeah, I think one of the defining things about Beryl, other than intensifying so quickly, is the fast forward motion the entire time from the moment we started tracking this storm, which feels like months ago. It's been moving so fast. It's incredibly fast for a tropical system, and so for it to be moving that fast and intensify that quickly and stay that organized was really impressive to see.
Yeah, there were definitely a lot of things about Beryl in general that we were like, we've never seen that before, and is it really going to do that? Oh, yep, it did that.
Sure is. There we go.
It formed, really, really far out east. It actually did form. It stayed together and continued to strengthen. So we'll see how the models do the rest of the season. I'm curious to, see how they pick up on that rapid intensification. We didn't see that a ton with a lot of the forecast models with this one, but we do know that intensity is just notoriously difficult to forecast.
Well, I am happy that we're not talking about the next system behind it. So that is
At the moment,
news.
yes, very, very happy about that. But as we go through the month of July, because it is only the 9th, this is kind of where we look for that development. So in general, the area where Beryl formed, but Beryl ended up forming a little bit farther to the east out in the Atlantic than where we typically look for those systems in July here. But look at what happens when we look at the month of August. So July, we look a little closer to home, but we have to zoom way out for that August development. And really, it's the entire Atlantic basin. It's what Beryl did because Beryl was a tropical wave that came off the coast of Africa. We don't see those typically develop early on in the season because of the dust. It's just not very a good environment in the middle of the Atlantic for that development just yet. But in August, things really get primed up.
Yes, and I'm so curious because it is such an unprecedented season because we have that record warmth. And we're basically already in our August pattern with Beryl. And so will we move on to the September pattern in August, or will we be kind of eternally suspended in August of the season?
And that is a question, too, and you can flip it the other way. I was thinking about that before we got on here. Just, some thoughts are the seasons going to last longer? Are we going to see stronger storms lasting into November now because those warmer waters linger a little bit longer? So starting earlier, lasting later. Things they're changing, but that's why we're on here. We're tracking them. We're keeping an eye on everything that does form and keeping you informed with every update that we do get to.
Yes, and the comment section has gone quiet, so I think that's a good sign for us that you answered all of our questions.
I love it. I'm so happy to be here and help. Keep in mind that Tracking the Tropics is an interactive program. We're live no matter if there's a storm or not every single Tuesday at 12:30 Eastern Time on this app or website that you're watching from, and we always take your questions live. You can use those hashtags that are under our names, hashtag Hey Amanda, hashtag Hey Rebecca. We're the two familiar faces, the hosts of the program, and then we bring on those featured meteorologists as well. So we keep an eye on those comment section throughout the week as well. So if you ever have a topic that you want us to cover during those quieter weeks, let us know so that we can kind of cover that as well. And we can make those graphics and describe things and explain things for you as the season goes on. But luckily, I am anticipating us going at least a week without an unscheduled episode, a non-regularly scheduled episode of Tracking the Tropics. So we'll be back, Rebecca, next Tuesday at 12:30 with hopefully still a quiet forecast out there, which is what we're seeing right now. But yeah, we did get that updated forecast from Colorado State, so you'll see that, on social media. It didn't increase by a lot, but they did increase it, and it really wasn't unexpected to see that.
No, especially with such a busy start with Beryl and being such a strange storm, and really an indication of what we might see throughout the season.
Yeah, hopefully not, but it's certainly possible. And if it does, we'll be here along the way right here on Tracking the Tropics. So that'll do it for this week's episode. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here right here next week at 12:30 Eastern Time.
Find Tracking the Tropics on these platforms. And for storm updates, the latest models, and helpful resources, visit trackingthetropics.tv.